Well, here I am after a while without a video in English, and I noticed that the subscribers are up to 27 from 23 a little while back. Again, I have no idea if this is in English or in Spanish that they are subscribing, but I wanted to speak about stuff on my mind, and I am prodded again by this desire and impulse to share so many years of Bible study and religious experience in so many different places. And I thought I would speak about the book of Job, which is quite appropriate for me these days when there is some suffering and even maybe anger against God in some way. Not that I have anger against God. If I did, I would tell you. I don't have anger against God. Maybe that'll be part of the topic today, which I don't know where it's going to go and how long it's going to last. I hope not very long. But certainly, sort of, okay, so without anger, I do question God and I tell him some very hard truths about myself that I think he already knows. So maybe that is some sort of a passive aggressive anger, but in any case, without perhaps taking out all my dirty laundry, I will try to offer for whoever is interested some reflections on suffering and human plight and the role of God or our attitude to God, taking as some sort of a foothold this book of Job. I find that I am often really helped by going to the Bible and all my biblical studies as a way of, in a way, getting enough material to speak about without getting too much off track or coming up empty. I did take the a course on Job, which is not easily accessible here as far as the picture I wanted to show, at the Pontifical Biblical Institute in Rome around 1997. And just on the Elihu speeches, so that, I'm going to try to find this real quick without doing anything too crazy here. Try to find this thing to show anyway. Just show this image of my Bible, with my annotations. In any case, the argument in the course and in the Elihu speeches, which are chapters 32 to 37 of the book of Job, is that this theologian, we might say, Elihu, comes in perhaps as an insertion to the book to sort of buttress or give a theological underpinning and greater depth to what these friends of Job have been saying, because what the friends of Job have been saying to Job as an explanation for Job's sufferings really comes up short. They are commonplaces. You must have done something wrong, Job. That sort of thing. And so then in chapter 32, we get this young man who seems to be the arbiter or the umpire that Job was seeking, trying to explain, things And as I recall, my professor, Robert Altan, a South African Jesuit, the course was in English in Rome, said that in a way some of these Hebrew word plays and expressions seem to indicate that Elihu is a windbag. It's a difficult Hebrew, this book. So anyway, the idea in Job, of course, or maybe not of course, but the idea in Job is that the traditional Deuteronomistic retribution theology found in the Psalms and in Deuteronomy. I place before you two paths, right, life and death. If you obey the covenant, these will be the blessings. If you disobey, these are the curses. The Psalms say, look around you. I've never seen a just man lacking. I've never seen, but the wicked get their comeuppance sooner or later, etc. And what I learned even as far back as Spain in 93, 94, taking courses on the exile and stuff like that, is that this theology of automatic retribution, attributed oftentimes to the Deuteronomic school or some variant thereof, where you have a covenant, which is in the nature of a pact with stipulations and conditions, and then covenant blessings and covenant curses for fulfilling it or complying with it or not. Well, this sort of simplistic explanation of why some people suffer and some do not uh, turned out to be quite inadequate, because there are plenty of evil people who seem to have an easy life and may even die, in bed without any great problems. Although it is said that Stalin, who had been a seminarian, as I recall, was quite perturbed on his deathbed. But we also see many, many young people. Today I was thinking, I put that song, has anybody here seen my old friend Abraham, Martin and John, or, The Good Die Young, etc. And some people say that even in the Maccabean period, a couple of less than 200 years before Jesus, so many martyrs and righteous people were dying that the belief in resurrection either arises or is sort of polished from maybe some other traditions, Persian or whatever, and you finally get a belief in an afterlife that means something, as opposed to Sheol, which is the abode of the dead, good and bad, etc. Many of which ideas can be found in the book of Kohelet or Ecclesiastes. Who knows if your soul goes up and down, that the end of everybody is the same, and be good, but don't try to be too good because it's not worth it, that sort of thing. I'm not going to get too much into the book of Ecclesiastes, Kohelet right now. I'm trying to stay with Job. But the idea in Job clearly is that Job is a righteous man, Tam. So he's going to be righteous like Abraham is told to be, like Noah is described as being. Tam is sort of like of one piece. I think the rabbis would say simple man in the sense of not complicated with a lot of different conflicts and stuff. So he's really a good guy. And if I recall, he even offers sacrifices for unknown sins, etc., and just in case, and this and that. And unbeknownst to him, as is well known, the Satan, the accuser, who seems to be a member of God's cabinet, who has weekly meetings, And this idea of the cabinet is a wonderful idea. I might as well talk about it. This is why these programs go on longer than I might hope. This is the divine council, the Sod, which is originally, I suppose, El, this bearded, white bearded ancient of days with his court involving the sons of El, or the sons of God, B'nai Elohim, who would be lesser divinities, etc. And so this ancient idea is evoked here. By the way, this Job, whose name I don't think anybody knows what it means. It's not really the name enemy. I don't think anybody knows what this name means. He's very ancient. I think he's one of the ones that appears in Ezekiel 14:14, along with Daniel, very ancient Ugaritic personage, and then Noah too. But he doesn't. He's not a Jew. He's not an Israelite. He's from some other place, probably the south of Edom. So he's a foreigner, and he's going to have a lot of free speech to complain against Yahweh. Uh, and so, or yeah, Yahweh, and not just God. So that the idea here is that he's put to the test, which is one of the things that the Satan does, kind of an accuser, that sort of thing. And in increments, touch his property but not his body, and then they touch his body, and he's all full of sores and sitting on the dung heap and all this stuff. And he curses his birth. His wife tells him to curse God and die, which is amended to in the transmitted text in Hebrew to bless God and die, as is known, and that's not really what I want to talk about. I don't want to give an exegesis of Job, except for my purposes here, which are to discuss suffering, the role of God, our attitude to God, and what kind of explanations might we find useful, or explanations that I might have to offer to try to illuminate these things according to my admittedly poor lights. So these friends come, and they start reasoning with Job, etc. But what was interesting to me in the course, and what I learned, and this is common in the Bible. In the Bible, you have a common literary genre, or a type of text or activity called the riv, which is a lawsuit. I was just reading N.T. Wright about Jesus's the agent of final judgment in Paul, reading the 2 volumes on Paul. And certainly in the Gospel of John, conviction comes, with the death of Jesus. It says when the Paraclete comes, he will convict the world in what's referring to sin, and as far as justice or righteousness, and as far as judgment, etc. And so you have this idea of a lawsuit in the Gospel of John. For sure, you have these Jews, quote unquote, everybody's Jewish, but the Jews are like these actors against Jesus, Judeans, etc. Jesus says in John 4, salvation comes from the Jews. Or the Samaritan woman says to him, how can you, a Jew, talk to me, a Samaritan woman? But these accusers of Jesus are sort of building up their case with evidence. And in chapter 5, they even, Jesus says, Moses will accuse you because you search the scriptures, but you don't get them, etc. Finally, Jesus is condemned in John 19:6. with the saying on the part of his accusers, we have a Torah, and according to this Torah, he must die because he made himself the Son of God. But what you really have there is, and a lawyer would know this, a lawsuit and a countersuit. So when you sue somebody, they can sue you back. And if you watch Judge Judy, you know that. So it's clear that Job is suing God, which reminds me of a wonderful story in the Joys of Yiddish, where this old, grandfather is so concerned about the suffering in the world that he sues God, calls a minyan, 10 Jews, and they pray and they fast and they accuse God of various things. And in the end, in a very Jewish, surprising way, God is convicted on 2 counts. He's convicted of certainly not taking care of widows and orphans, as he's supposed to be the defender of, and also having unleashed the evil spirit in the world to fool gullible people, which is the majority probably. So that, and then in Micah, in Lent, we have, what have I done to you people? God is suing, and Hosea is all full of this reap thing, this lawsuit that God accuses the people of their violations, legal violations as far as Torah, etc. But here the tables are turned. It's Job suing God. And he complains that he can't find a process server who can serve process of the lawsuits on God. He's hiding very well. And Job cannot serve the lawsuit papers on God. So the trial cannot really take place. And I was thinking this morning in my prayer, and I actually looked for it. And then I was looking for, and I saw that it was a really not difficult text in Hebrew, but difficult enough that I went to a couple of translations, and I ended up with the Jewish Publication Society, which I'm going to even paraphrase a little bit. Even though he kills me, and even though I have no hope, I am still going to confront him face to face. So this is Job's mood. It's a Jewish book that has given itself free rein to complain against God. That in itself is remarkable. I have oftentimes noted that the Jewish scriptures, to my knowledge, are the most self-critical religious writings of any people. I may be wrong. Morton Smith may disagree with me when he was alive. I cover this in my intro to the Bible notes, if I'm not mistaken, or in some other one of my notes on my website, Bible Explainer, Chavez. If you Google that, you'll find it. But in Ezekiel, where the very ancestry of Israel is ridiculed and insulted, and in many other places, you have this self-criticism. So here you have Job criticizing God, and it's a book that made its way into the Jewish canon. It's the third book in the writings, in the third part of the Bible. And so, and there's parodies of psalms here. For example, this psalm that says, anything I do, you're always watching over me, and all this kind of nice stuff. Here it says, I can't even swallow without you breathing down my neck, God. So that it is a monument to the authenticity of Judaism in its reality. It's real. It's very real. And here you have free rein to complain against God. So that I do think, and the famous line in Job, man's life on earth is a tzaba, which Jerome translates militia, and I say boot camp. It is hard to live. And the older you get, in many ways, the harder it is. And I don't think it does much good to deny it or to paper it over or whitewash it or whatever. I'm reading, I read various books in the morning, little bits of various books, and then I spend more time on a more fun book. But I was reading about Saint Teresa of Avila, famous mystic Carmelite, 16th century, and all the terrible things that happened one in a row. Her friend, the Carmelite Father Gracian, told her to write the interior castle about the high grades of prayer, etc. And then she finishes that in a few months. But then they imprison John of the Cross, and then they also imprison Father Gracian, who was her favorite Carmelite, much younger. She herself falls down the stairs and famously, for those who know Teresa's story, breaks her left arm in December the 24th, Christmas Eve. What a way to spend Christmas, right? 1577. And then in May, some local healer in Medina, healer woman, adjusted her arm, so 5 months later, she gets her arm adjusted. She famously said to God, when there was a very long or troubled journey on these carts and horses and all this stuff, she said to God, this is terrible. And God said to her, this is how I treat my friends. To which Teresa replied, that's why you have so few. So that I think venting against God is perfectly acceptable. And one of the thoughts that I've been having is that, for example, any of us, including myself, who am not always the most charitable or nice or patient or anything, I can find it within myself to forgive many people. And not to talk about myself, but in general, I can see how many people who may not have been so nice, according to many people, God would have no problem welcoming them. There are some people I'm not sure God would welcome. I really don't know if he would welcome Hitler or Stalin. I don't know that. I'm not going to go there. But other people that in the media or in other places would be condemned, facilely condemned by many people. We have people, I think, that project guilt onto others in our society. So they love to beat up on certain people that makes them feel like they are better. It could be left, right, center, whatever. It's a human a psychological mechanism, projection and other types of psychological mechanisms. So if I say, if I can envision how this person would be welcome, and some of them are not that bad, but some of them may be a little worse, then how can God be more narrow-minded than me? Or how can God be less magnanimous than, um, human beings? I was thinking actually about Anselm, Saint Anselm, the great Benedictine of the year 1100. The ontological argument, God is that greater than which we cannot imagine. So that as a concept, if you want to think about God, God has all these superlatives. He's the most wise, the most powerful, the most loving, the most everything. And in fact, the argument, as I recall, that Anselm makes is that existence would have to be one of the qualities of someone greater than which you cannot conceive. So you can't say God is the concept of somebody that is the wisest, the most powerful, the most this, the most that, but he doesn't exist. Well, then he's lacking the most important thing. That's his argument. Logicians could argue with it. But my point is that God has to have, and the Pope Francis stresses that, so much mercy as to encompass all kinds of situations, all kinds of deaths, all kinds of lives, even. Because I find, and I think many people find, that when we, and I study biographies, when we study a person's biography, I was just reading about Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, I read all kinds of biographies. The more you understand somebody, the more you can explain why they were the way they were. Now I'm reading about Johnny Carson now, who could be incredibly cold. He could write you off, just like Frank Sinatra. If you offended him or divulged a private matter with Frank Sinatra or with Johnny, or even the famous Joan Rivers case, she was his protege. He discovered her overnight. He could make you a star. He made her a star. The fact that she went over to Fox to compete against him, that was the death knell for their friendship. So that's the kind of person that I'm talking about. His sons didn't know him. He died alone. The book I'm reading, a book by Henry Bushkin, his attorney. He was attorney, confidant, problem solver, tennis partner, everything, and supposedly best friend. And Bushkin says, I really wasn't his friend. I was his employee. We were very close. We went to Wimbledon every year, south of France every year. Our wives were close. Johnny had 4 wives. But friend? Not really. It's like one of these covenants, superior with the inferior sign here. That was not a friendship. But I can, and we all love Johnny Carson on TV. If you know the private man, you say not so likable at all and cold. Then you understand his mother and father, especially his mother. And I'll give you just one example. His mother, Johnny gave his parents a 45-day trip around the world, basically. First class, gave them an American Express card and says, spend whatever you want on me. 47 days passed, and his parents didn't call Johnny once to say, we're having a great time. They return, and Johnny asks his mother, how was the trip? Her response is, I'm glad to be back home. Well, when you understand his mother, then you understand Johnny. If you want to try to understand me, understand my father. It's his birthday today. He would have been 112. You want to understand my father, who was no piece of cake, try to understand or know about his father, our grandfather who died a long time ago. Nobody met him. And so when you have this understanding, you can then accept and justify and excuse and love and embrace. And if we can do that as badly as we do, God is even greater. Getting back to this suffering and old age in the book of Job, the book of Job is not going to offer a real solution to this suffering. It is going to burst the confines of the traditional theology of retribution. You do good things, it'll go well. You do bad things, it'll not go well. There's people that use drugs and drink and who knows what, and they may suffer consequences, and that's logical. I have a friend who was known as a straight arrow, married his childhood sweetheart, only girlfriend and wife he ever had. He was in his 30s, maybe towards the late 30s. Straight arrow, didn't drink, smoke, anything. And got brain cancer. Left behind the wife, who has not married since. And this happened 25 years ago or so. And young children at the time. And so the retributive theory didn't work for him exactly. So what do we make? So what is the message of the book of Job, and what do we make of our sufferings? Now, clearly, without getting, I'm going to get back to Job in a second, but clearly one of my main theological sort of thoughts is the divine pedagogy. God trains us, teaches us. It's literally, almost literally said in Hebrews chapter 12, where it says that no correction. By the way, I have a short article in English and Spanish on divine discipline, correction, musar in Hebrew, paideia in Greek. Spare the rod, spoil the child. It's, first of all, physical punishment. Letter to the Hebrews chapter 12 says that when you are corrected, it's because your Father loves you. And so that no discipline is pleasant when received, but thereafter it produces the sweet fruit of righteousness. And so for sure, we should look at our sufferings as things that we endure and that do push us to the limit many times. Thérèse of Lisieux famously said, don't keep poisons around when suffering is so intense, because the temptation to suicide. Elizabeth of the Trinity, her rough contemporary, says something similar. So that, and 1 Corinthians says God will not try us beyond our strength. But it sounds like he's the one that determines what our strength is, not us, because we may feel we are at the end. And even Paul says, I really almost despaired of living in the beginning of 1 Corinthians with these famous battle in Ephesus that I don't think anybody knows exactly what it was. But there you have it right there in the first chapter of 2 Corinthians. God alternates consolation, I guess paraklesis, where paraclete comes from, and tribulation, thlipsis, which is an eschatological end of time trial, deliver us from, that's another word in Greek, peirasmos, from temptation, from being put to the test. But nevertheless, this alternation is the divine pedagogy. We get consolation. If we get too much of it, we grow flabby and self-sufficient and comfortable and lower our guard. Then we get tribulation, and we have to get on a diet and start trying to be better, etc. Change our ways. If you get too much tribulation, it might overwhelm you, and that's one of the cruxes, if you want, of this whole issue. Are there people that are too crushed down? I think I read in college philosophy of history, Arnold Toynbee, if I'm not mistaken, how civilizations emerge. You have to have optimal conditions. If it's too easy, you don't develop that much. If it's too hard, you stay kind of squatting the whole time. You need a good combination of enough challenges to develop skills and practices and attitudes, but not too easy, not too hard. And really, a lot of us may say, well, I think it's pretty hard. But then we have this idea, and I think James says it too, the letter of James, that we are not tried beyond our strength, or with the trial comes the strength given by God. And that's where the challenge really lies. And this is where Therese also comes in. This is about as best as I can come up with. Trust in God that he will not let you fall. Um, in other words, let him be in charge in the test, and don't despair of what he has given you as a suffering or as a situation or as a cross. They come in all shapes and sizes and forms. Family crosses, health crosses, financial crosses, social political crosses. The human body is a universe capable of incredible suffering. In Spanish, we have a saying, no hay mal que dure 100 años, ni cuerpo que lo resista. There is no malady that lasts 100 years, nor body that can withstand it. So that sooner or later you're going to die if it's that bad. But the point being that I do believe that this, and there's a nice Latin expression for it, obsequium fidei. We give to God the gift of our faith. We say, I don't understand it, I don't like it, but you ask me, like you asked Abraham when he was old, to go where he knew not. One step enough for me, says John Cardinal Newman in Lead Kindly Light. So that I have found that you have to hang in there. I saw my blood results just yesterday or the day before, and I was very, very concerned. And I started Googling everything and saying, my God, this is bad and this is irreversible if it's that, and blah, blah, blah. And I had my appointment the following week, which was yesterday, with my primary care physician, whom I like because I'm a worrier and he's not. I have a cardiologist who's a worrier, pills for everything, concerned about everything. But this guy is not. And he said to me, oh, this isn't that bad. Keep doing what you're doing. Don't worry about this. See me in 6 months. And even though I have not yet recovered fully from the unpleasant or the concern that I had, and and the idea that this is getting bad. This is getting bad. Um, Nevertheless, it's a prime example of uh, how the pedagogy works. We try to what we think is our limit for now, and then all of a sudden relief comes. And if we ask ourselves, what guarantee is there that it'll always be like that? Maybe one day it'll really be terrible. But when that day comes, which it may never will, it'll be a different situation. Then you will be either more resigned, or all these sweet fruits of righteousness that letter to the Hebrews chapter 12 talks about will kick in. So what we're asked for is this trust. And if you saw my programs on Teres, which I doubt, I have 3 of them, I think. A friend of mine gave me a book, Mark, that said in English, it is by trust and trust alone that we must be led to God, or something like that. And I woke up one night in the middle of the night at 2 or 3 when I couldn't sleep, and I decided to look for this saying of Thérèse of Lisieux in French, and I took a book basically at random, opened it at random. First page that I opened it to didn't have that. Turned the page, it was there. Had no idea. No, even unconsciously, it would have been almost impossible for me to have gone to that page. It was not a book that I used very much at all. And I look around my house and I look around my life and I see signs, clearly indisputable signs of the presence of God. I have a friend who did a retreat with me, an Emmaus retreat, and sometimes he was very down in the dumps when he did it. He's not a believer, not a great churchgoer or anything like that. But afterwards, he told me, I think it was Easter Sunday too, one year, God has intervened in my life without a shadow of a doubt 2 times since this thing. So we can rely on these times that we have felt God to be indisputably present, or touched by God, as a Dominican once told me. Once we can hold on to this divine spark, so to speak, however dark the surrounding areas are, as Paul says, if God is for us, who can be against us? What will separate us? And now I've tried to build up to that without having it sound like a cliche, because it's easy to rattle off, positive thoughts, Dale Carnegie or whatever. But when you zero in on what do I hang on to when I feel that I am in the storm in Mark 4 and Jesus is sleeping, and they ask him, Master, are you not concerned that we perish? And he commands the wind and sea, and they ask, who is this who even wind and sea obey? And without even having planned that, although there the unconscious might be at work, but totally unplanned, I'm going to finish up in the next 4 minutes to keep this at 45 minutes with the book of Job, which is, yes, there is either an added or some sort of intentional conclusion, which is that God speaks from the whirlwind and restores to Job all his property and children and this and that and the other. One of the daughters is named Jemima, that sort of thing, Karen, etc., Horn. And the idea is that Job turns and intercedes for his friends. And when he turns, which is the Hebrew verb shuv, which is a conversion, return to the land, change of fortunes verb, the way it's used. When Job prays for his friends, his fortunes turned. He was converted, if you will, and everything ended well. So I think that we can use that as a basis for hope, as a basis for hope. Just like the same Job says, even though you might kill me, God, and even though I may have no hope, I am still going to confront you face to face. And the very fact that Job is talking to God, whom he can't serve legally with the lawsuit, means that he can't stop thinking about God. And if you're thinking about God, and if you're either believe in God, trust in God, or it's anemic, or you're trying to, that's enough in for God. If this Saint Anselm thing of he's greater than which no one can conceive, if we think if there is a God, anything is possible. We may think he's not doing enough for the widows and the orphans, and he unleashed, the evil spirit and QAnon or whatever it's unleashed in the world today. But God is in charge. He's the boss, as Robert Evans said when he learned that Zanuck was the boss over Hemingway, over Ava Gardner, over the director of The Sun Also Rises. God is really the boss, and there is no one that can say no to the boss. So that with these ideas, I'm going to stop. By the way, I had a glitch. I guess the screen went on save mode, And when I clicked it again, I got this close-up of my Salvadorian cross that says the new creation. So it's the cross of Jesus, no doubt. The scars are there, no doubt. But it's all the new creation, colorful, risen. And if we were to, you know, go a little bit, full picture, you would see Pentecost with Mary and some disciples right under at the foot of the cross.